You're watching Fox 17 News on air and streaming until 7 p.m.
Thanks so much for joining us for Fox 17 News at 4. I'm Annie Satowski.
And I'm Christian Frank. Well, some progress for cyclists across Michigan today as legislation designed to keep them safer moves to the full Senate. It's
a law inspired by that tragedy that struck Kalamazoo last summer. Fox 17's Darren Cunningham is in Lansing after hearing from the survivors of that crash.
Yes, another hurdle cleared for cyclists here in the state of Michigan. But this package of road safety bills has even more significance for the survivors of that fatal Kalamazoo crash.
We need to affect the driving culture in that someone wouldn't even consider getting in the car and passing too close.
Paul Gobble testifying in support of bicycle safety legislation in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee Wednesday morning. He knows the dangers firsthand as one of 4 people injured in a deadly crash in Kalamazoo June 7th last year. 5 of his friends died after a truck ran them over. The alleged driver, Charles Pickett Jr., is now awaiting trial.
There are some misconceptions out there that whether it's a bicyclist, a runner, a walker, there's people who think that the roadways are only for cars. But in fact, it goes back to the formation of roads. Cyclists have always been allowed on the roads, and so have runners, walkers.
State Senator Margaret O'Brien of Portage and her Democratic colleague, David Nezik, introduced the bills hoping to keep people like Gobble safe. The bill's main goal? Require drivers across Michigan to keep a distance of at least 5 feet when passing cyclists and other users. Some individual cities and towns already have this ordinance, including Kalamazoo.
I think both with the visibility that our tragedy brought to the interaction between vehicles and bicyclists, as well as Kalamazoo passing the 5-foot regulation, both of those things have helped.
The legislation also tightens distracted driving laws to include all handheld devices and stiffens the punishment for such accidents and requires more education for new drivers. The bills passed the Judiciary Committee and will now head to the full Senate. If passed, it still needs House approval.
You have the support you need either in the Senate and the House?
I have it in the Senate. I'm still working with the House.
O'Brien says similar legislation is sitting in the House with some bipartisan support. The legislation wasn't voted on by the House last year, but these survivors hope it has the necessary momentum this time around.
Enough is enough. Michigan is lagging behind in this legislation. I would like to see Michigan as a leader in safety for all outdoor users and recreation, and it's time for them to step up and make it safe.
As the legislation moves forward, we will keep you posted on what happens. In Lansing, Darren Cunningham, Fox 17 News.
It has been more than a year since an erratic driver smashed into a group of bicyclists in Kalamazoo County. 5 people died at the scene, 2 men and 3 women. Many others were severely injured. The driver of the truck, Charles Pickett, is charged with second-degree murder and is still waiting to stand trial. And now those who survived the crash are throwing their support behind new legislation to make the roads safer for bicyclists. They testified in Lansing today. WZZM 13's Noah Fromson was there.
If these bills become laws, drivers will have to be much more aware of bicycles. They'll need a 5-foot buffer before they can pass a cyclist on the road.
We all have our battles we're still fighting.
15 months after the crash near Kalamazoo that killed 5 of their fellow cyclists, the survivors still think about that truck coming at them.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
The memory alone brings heartache.
And if a fire truck or an ambulance goes down the road, it will take your breath away.
But they let it resurface on Wednesday.
If we can tell part of our story to help make it safer for the others, then we're happy to do that.
The group testified in favor of 6 bills brought by Republican State Senator Margaret O'Brien, which all passed through committee.
All of us either bicycle, walk, run. We use our roadways in some manner outside of being a motorist.
In addition to the 5-foot rule, the bills also require driver's ed classes to focus more on bicycle safety.
Everybody knows you just put on your seatbelt and you don't need to worry about that ticket. This 5-foot passing law would be the same thing. We just need to ingrain that into the driving culture to save lives.
The bills were introduced last year, but killed in the House before reaching the governor's desk. This time around, O'Brien says she's more confident.
So we have some strong supporters. I expect that there will be 4 House bills signed into law and 2 Senate bills signed into law.
And the survivors say they'll brave the pain to make that come true.
We got to get word out that we belong on the road and have rights on the road.
Noah Fromson, WZZM 13 News.
2 of the 6 bills call for harsher sentencing for people and drivers who hit people on the road while they're using a phone, a tablet, or an internet device.
An emotional day in Lansing today as 4 people who witnessed the dangers of cycling firsthand recalled the Kalamazoo cycling tragedy before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
24-hour News 8's Brady Gillum joins us live now to explain what those survivors want and how they're going about getting it done. Brady?
Well, Sue and Brian, those survivors are voicing support for new legislation that would make roads safer for people who use them, including cyclists. State Senator Margaret O'Brien of Portage and another state senator introduced a handful of bills they hope will prevent future bicycling tragedies, like the one back in June of 2016. That's when police say Charles Pickett Jr. allegedly drove his truck through a crowd of cyclists, killing 5. 4 survived.
The bone in my ankle is dead. I shouldn't be able to walk on it. I shouldn't be able to stand.
Today, those 4 survivors testified before the State Senate Judiciary Committee.
My name is Jennifer Johnson. I'm a survivor of the June 7 bicycling tragedy last summer.
Hoping to prevent future bike crashes.
We need to affect the driving culture in that someone wouldn't even consider getting in the car and passing too close.
2 bills would require passing cyclists to provide a 5-foot passing zone. Other bills would require driver training classes to include an hour of instruction about the laws pertaining to what the bill describes as vulnerable roadway users, like bicycles, motorcycles, and pedestrians.
I'm reminded of back when I was a high school student. None of us wore seatbelts. My folks didn't use seatbelts. Nobody used seatbelts back then. And then somehow we went to driver's ed. And in the driver's ed program, they managed to take a bunch of 15 to 17-year-old kids and get them all very effectively seatbelts.
The bills would also expand the definition of texting and driving to prohibit the use of cameras, tablets, and computers.
So we have a lot that we need to do to make sure everyone's aware. Everyone needs to be safe. The bicyclist, the runner, the walker, and also the motorist.
Now, all of the bills moved to the full Senate for consideration since the committee passed all of the bills unanimously. Back to you.
We need to affect the driving culture in that someone wouldn't even consider getting in the car and passing too close.
In a unanimous vote at the state capitol today, lawmakers moved forward a package of bills to increase bicyclist safety in Michigan. And the 4 survivors of the Kalamazoo biking tragedy were there sharing their personal stories. Last year's fatal crash.
News Channel 3's Christine Van Timmeren spoke with them about how this bill will also honor the lives of their friends.
The testimony of the 4 biking tragedy survivors lent a powerful voice to the fight for increased biking safety on the roads. Last year, this legislation failed, so this year they hope their voices inspire change here in Lansing. They survived the worst cycling tragedy in our state. Now the 4 Kalamazoo cyclists, Paul Runnels, Paul Gobble, Jennifer Johnson, and Sheila Jeske, have made it their mission to fight for change.
Enough is enough. Michigan is lagging behind in this legislation. I would like to see Michigan as a leader.
Senator Margaret O'Brien praised the survivors for their bravery on the Senate floor after today's committee hearing. They are all asking for a 5-foot passing rule, as well as an hour of driver's training instruction related to bike safety. The 4 are fighting this battle simultaneously with their own personal struggles.
Even if a fire truck or an ambulance goes down the road, it will take your breath away. It takes you right back to that night.
They think about what happened to their 5 friends every day and shared the physical hardships they still face.
Result of my MRI, the bone in my ankle is dead. I shouldn't be able to walk on it. I shouldn't be able to stand. I've got tendons and nerves that are dislocated.
But they power through for their families, for their fellow cyclists, hoping the loss they feel inspires action.
None of these laws would help us, but if it keeps one other person from going through what I am physically going through and my other fellow bike riders are going through, you know, it would just mean the world to us.
From here, the legislation moves to the Senate, where Senator O'Brien is hopeful it will pass. Passing in the House is the hurdle she hopes to overcome. In Lansing, Christine Van Timmeren, News Channel 3.